All right, supervisors, if you could please make sure you are signed in. Supervisor Niles, Supervisor Matt Phipps, and I believe Supervisor Shimalunas, she's excused. All right, I will call the November meeting of the Manitowoc County Board to order. We will start with an invocation by Supervisor Falkowski, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
We now thank God as we apply the word invocation, translated from Latin, invocare, meaning to call upon assistance. Tonight's invocation is a call for divine aid, a prayer asking for God's blessing. As we meet here tonight, let us pause to reflect on what has united us, the hard work, perseverance, and the shared dedication to make things better. In this moment, we draw strength from the core of our faith that propels us forward. God, let us remember that we are not here to insert our individual goals, but to contribute to something far greater than ourselves. Not just cloaked with the protected perceptions, but the actionable product. May we be inspired by God's power in our collective effort. Let us invoke the spirit and the energy that empowers us to overcome any obstacle for the legitimate betterment of Manitowoc County. God, we ask that this moment of invocation ignite our drive and our focus, guide us forward with purpose and conviction. Thank you, God. Deo gracias, shalom, inshallah, and amen.
Thank you, Supervisor Falkowski. Roll call is going around. We have 24 members present. Our first item of business is a proclamation proclaiming Manitowoc County America Recycles Day 2024. So, Dale, if you'd like to join me up at the front. Generate more than 30,000 tons of solid waste per year, and this solid waste is buried at a local landfill site. And whereas Manitowoc County residents annually recycle or compost more than 18,000 tons of material through various collection programs, and whereas the Manitowoc County Recycling Facility is the most utilized municipal recycling program in Manitowoc County, serving all county residents and having helped reduce the volume of solid waste going into the landfill site from 58,000 tons per year in the early 90s, before the existing recycling program, to the present yearly tonnage of about 30,000 tons. And whereas recycling saves precious energy, conserves valuable natural resources, protects the environment, reduces landfill needs, and has a positive economic impact. And whereas Manitowoc County residents can do more to reduce and recycle through education and participation. And whereas waste reduction and the purchase of recycled content products are critically important elements of an environmentally responsible waste management program. And whereas America Recycles Day is a national promotion to help raise awareness and to provide education about recycling, reducing recycling contamination, and buying recycled products. And now, therefore, I, Bob Ziegelbauer, County Executive, and Tyler Martell, Manitowoc County Board Chair, proclaim November 15th, 2024, America Recycles Day 2024 in Manitowoc County.
I just want to say on behalf of Ascend Services, I can't thank you enough for this partnership. This has been going on for over 30 years, and what it's done for our clients, what it's done for Manitowoc County residents, I can't say enough. So again, thank you very much for this partnership. We really appreciate it. So thank you again. Thank you.
And that will take us into our public comment. So members of the public are invited to speak for up to 3 minutes on business pertaining be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Any items to be removed? All right, seeing none, I'd look for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Motion by Supervisor Mink, second by Supervisor Sikowitz. And now the clerk will conduct the vote.
Supervisors will now vote on the consent agenda.
And the consent agenda is approved. That will take us to our committee reports. First is Aging and Disability. Board of Health, Supervisor Metzger. Thank you. Supervisor Falkowski, Criminal Justice Coordinating Council.
Meeting of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council was November 6th. The Community Navigator for Diversion, Deflection, and Program gave a report, also provided informational pamphlet used for distribution describing the services they provide. The report on drug court, the number of cases can be found in the minutes when they become posted. Suggest reviewing them for details. There was an announcement about a cooking activity with participants and the Dose of Hope campaign. A brief access to court committee reports stated that they identified areas including suggesting multilingual material in the court and a solution for those having physical difficulties gaining access to the courthouse. The next CJC council meeting is scheduled for January 8th, 2025. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The end of my report.
Thank you. Okay, that'll lead us to the Executive Committee. I just want to announce that the Executive Committee will be meeting after the new year, considering this budget. I think a lot of us still have remaining questions about exactly what is happening with our Human Services budget. And I feel, and other members of the Executive Committee feel, that it's important that we start looking at that a little bit more closely. So I'm calling together an Executive Committee meeting in January, a time and date to be determined, but I just want you all to be knowing that, looking forward to that. There is no dates yet. Okay, that'll take us to the Expo Ice Center Board. Supervisor Benke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Short report. Committees are all meeting. Expo, all the working groups, specifically the Finance Committee, and I think you've probably seen it in your weekly agendas that are coming through, the closed session for the Finance Committee, trying to work on a contract proposal with our ride provider, and that's what those closed sessions are for. I think we're pretty close to getting there, which is a pretty big item for us, and we're looking at possibly a 4-year contract with our ride provider at the Expo. So that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Supervisor Hanson with the Finance Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We met last night. Thank you for your support on the ordinance that we passed in the Committee of the Whole minutes. That was just bringing our ordinance for selling property up to the new state law. And that passed, and thank you for that support. And now, we also discussed the budget last night. The budget you are being presented tonight has 2 amendments to it from what you saw before. The first amendment is $25,000 was added for the coroner's budget. Coroner requested that, sat down and talked with the executive. 5,000 of that money is coming from new fees or increased fees in his department, and 20,000 will come out of the general fund. So that was one of the amendments that was approved and passed with this budget. The second was moving some money in human services. There were some security issues within human service department building, and money was moved around within that department. Nothing was added, but it was moved from line to line, so that had to be registered and amended to the budget. So, that being said, I move that we adopt this budget, and we'll start the discussion from there.
Discussion on the budget. Any discussion on the budget? Okay, Supervisor Hanson.
Just as a note, I'd like to thank the DA for sitting down with the executive. There were some concerns in that budget and some additional things she would like to see, and they sat down and made a plan for next year. Also, the sheriff, many of you know that he is interested in body cams and having that become part of the sheriff's department. He also sat down with the executive, and they came up with an idea on how to do this within the budget again for next year. Part of the issue with the cameras was that the history policy of the county is we have to do RFPs on different things. And even though you might find something you really want, we have to go out and make sure that that is the best system, not just for what you as a department need, but also the best for the taxpayers on how much we're spending. So it may come down to the system that he really likes, but we have to do some study and see that to make sure that we're spending the taxpayers' money as frugally and as best we can to make sure that we get the right product. So I was happy that the sheriff and Bob sat down and came up with a plan, and also that he did that with the DA. Part of this is also because the concern was brought up by you, Mr. Chairman, that these things happen, so department heads did take some advantage of that. So thank you to you also.
Thank you. I'm seeing Supervisor Hummel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess one thing I would really like to see in the budget would be a wage study. So I'm going to propose that we take the 2% increase out at the start of the year and turn that down to 1%, and they get their 2% review raise, so they could get up to a 3% raise, and take that money in savings and budget it for a wage study. The last wage study we did as a county was 12 years ago. A lot has changed in 12 years, as we all know. We keep handing out 4% raises. Are we actually correcting the problem, or are we just exploiting the problem? Are some departments good in compensation pay? Are some departments falling way behind? I think this would be a good reset now that we have a sales tax budget to get back to square one with our employees. So that being said, I'll make a motion that we go down to a 1% at the start of the year for a raise, and budgeted for a wage study.
Who was that second? Thank you. Supervisor Shiesel. Any discussion on the amendment, or on the motion to amend?
Can somebody repeat that amendment?
Yes, I can. Sure, I'll try to speak closer to the microphone too. So there was a motion and a second to amend the proposed budget to take the 2% wage increase, reduce it to a 1% wage increase, and use those funds to for a wage salary study. And then that was seconded. Supervisor Shiesel. Okay, any discussion on that amendment?
We would need to know the specificity of the amount of dollars.
See, that's
transferred from line A to line B. So that we can't do that
Okay, how do we ascertain that information?
That's probably a question for the finance director. And
Okay.
I don't know that I'm gonna defer to the finance director.
Just off a base rough estimates, a 1% base increase represents about $400,000 to the budget. The last time I saw a wage study done, a wage study ran anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000. So you can see there's a difference there of quite a bit of money.
Okay. Are we good to continue discussing this, or do we need more specifics?
I think you do need more specifics. Just from the standpoint of, and again, I'm going to defer to the finance director of what would our budget, what would our levy be, and what would our line items be in order to identify the amendment.
If you're going to answer, could you please just come to the podium?
I guess if you're going to take the net effect of the two, your two options are to, one, either lower the levy, or two, reduce, well, you can't do that. I'm giving an estimate for the sales tax. So I guess your only option is to reduce the levy by that applicable amount. And I can't give you an absolute dollar amount. I mean, I'm just giving you a rough estimate as to right now. And
That's my concern with the motion is we do need the specificity of the dollar.
I'm giving you my best guess, and that's.
Are we able to discuss this motion?
Certainly can discuss it. I think you certainly can discuss the motion. I'm just trying to figure out how to go forward. I don't know how to proceed forward absent some hard figures, and if the motion was to, because that would be across all discussion. My difficulty is coming in because wages are across all departments. And I was just gonna say is if we just, for example, remove $300,000 from wages given JJ's statement, and that throw in $100,000 for a wage study, but that's changing every department's budget. That's where I'm having a tough time coming up with an easy solution. JJ's going to have to provide input in on this.
Just piggyback off Peter's comments. If you did do that reduction to the 1% base increase, that would impact every single department across the board. So this isn't something that would be very, very simple for me to come up with, because it would take time. Because, like I said, this is impacting soil and water, recycling, solid waste, public works, IT. It's a significant undertaking to move that 1% back down.
Do the wage study with and increase the sales tax estimate.
Yeah, because you're not changing multiple across the board discussion.
Okay. So there's a motion now, so if we can't amend that, we'd have to vote that down.
Yes, that is correct. There is a motion for it. Correct.
Okay. Supervisor Hummel, would you be interested in a motion that would, instead of reducing the salary line by 1%, which will affect all areas of the budget, be willing to make a motion to include a wage study, and instead of using the property tax levy, we would increase the estimate we're receiving for the sales tax revenue. If so, we would have to vote down this motion because we have a motion and a second on a table, and we would have to have a new motion. We have to vote down that motion. We have a motion on the table. We have one motion on the table, and that's a motion to amend the budget. I mean, can they just withdraw it, or do we have to vote it down? I was under the impression we had to vote down a
A
motion.
proper procedure would be to, at this point, to vote it down.
Yeah, we can make it.
Okay.
Or vote it up. I mean, it's
Or
to vote on it, yeah.
Or vote it up, but we don't know what we're discussing.
That's the issue, is you don't know the dollars.
Okay, I'm gonna offer an opportunity for the three people that have asked to speak on this motion if they would like to speak before we would vote on the motion on the table. Supervisor Bry, I see you first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I certainly understand the spirit of Supervisor Hamill's motion, but here's what I was talking about finance last night as well. When you want to come in and make a decision and maybe have some ideas, because I'm sort of open, I'm sure everybody's open to ideas, you have to have specifics. This would have been a motion, you should have talked to the finance director, could have talked with personnel. There's got to be specific numbers, as the council has mentioned. I was going to do a point of order, but you need to point on that. And I guess at this time, I'm going to call the question on the motion.
Okay, so we have a new motion to call the question on the amendment. So I'll give you a second to type that up. But basically, a motion to call the question is a motion to end discussion. If you would like to end discussion on the amendment, you would vote yes. If you do not want to end discussion on the motion to amend, you would vote no. That does not require a second. Okay. Okay. Do we have a second for that motion? To call the question. Motion by Supervisor Granbaugh.
The system will not let me do it without a second.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah,
Normally
I was
does
gonna
not
say,
require a
yes.
second, but. Okay, so the motion is to call the question.
Supervisors will now call the question.
That requires a two-thirds majority vote. See if we can have that. I teach history, not math. Yes, that's two-thirds. Exactly, two-thirds. Okay. All right, so the motion is to call the question. Now, we will immediately vote on Supervisor Hummel's amendment. And that amendment, you have ready? The motion to call the question passed, so we're prohibited from having discussion. We have to vote on the amendment now. Yes, the clerk will read the amendment.
Supervisors will now vote on a motion to amend line 25, change 2% to 1%, and include a wage study to be funded in the amount of $30,000.
Okay, and that amendment fails on a vote of 6 yes, 18 no. So now we are back to the original motion to pass the budget. Now, Supervisor Hummel, would you like to make a motion to include a wage study using the sales tax revenue, and we would increase the sales tax revenue to $7,530,000? I believe that's, you said, the cleanest way to do this. Supervisor Hummel.
I'll make a motion that we do a wage study with the sales tax money that includes review of job descriptions and wages.
So there's a motion by,
Point of clarification, Mr. Chairman.
yes, Supervisor Bry.
We're talking an increase in revenue regarding the sales tax by, I didn't hear an amount, $30,000. That's what, you need to increase a line item once again, and that was not made in that motion.
Supervisor Hummel, what is the amount that you would propose to increase the line item for the sales tax?
$60,000.
In the amount of $60,000.
Which line item, which department? I think that's what Supervisor Bry was asking, is that we have to identify. So we're gonna increase the tax levy estimated revenue. That line item exists by $60,000? Okay. Then we have to have a corresponding expense line item. And we should identify what line item and in what department. I agree, but then we need to identify the line item. So we need
If there is no line item for a wage study, where would that be?
I assume, and again, this is going to be a finance director question, but I assume then that we would include a line item for a wage study. So it would be to include a new line item for a wage study in the amount of $60,000.
A new line item for a wage study. So Supervisor Bry, allow me to clarify what I have heard and make sure that it is amenable for a motion. So the motion is to increase the sales tax line item to $7,560,000, so an increase of $60,000, and adding a line item in the budget that would direct $60,000 to the personnel department to complete a wage study including wages and job descriptions. Does that sound right? Does that answer your question, Supervisor Bry?
I guess just quickly, we're talking $60,000 in increase of revenue for the sales tax. That line item, correct?
Correct.
We're budgeting $7.5 million right now, so. Okay. Thank you again.
Correct, thank you. 7,560,000. It's an increase of 60,000 over what it was. Okay, and that was seconded by Supervisor Sheasel. Any discussion on the amendment? Supervisor Hanson?
I understand the spirit of this. $60,000 on a wage study. I even understand that. The problem is, I'm not sure how effective wage studies are right now. Every time we have openings at the Sheriff's Department and other departments, we end up having to look at how much we pay to try to attract people to take those jobs. If wages, there is not a lot of people willing to come and work unless you can set wages a little differently than we've done in the past, meaning Sheriff may have to offer a little bit more money. Human Services may have to offer that to get certified people here. So that wage study may be good for a year, and then it goes back to what do we have to pay to bring people to Manitowoc County to work? I'm not sure $60,000 is a good use of taxpayers' money for something that may or may not be valid. You have to go by the market. And the market right now is there's a lot of jobs and not a lot of people applying. So we've had to do some things to bring people in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm seeing Supervisor Bry.
Thank you, excuse me, thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to repeat some of the things that Supervisor Hanson said, and like I said, in the spirit of the amendment is definitely, I'm in favor as well. I guess I'm hooked on semantics tonight, and maybe I can defer to Corporation Counsel once again. If this motion does pass and the amounts are amended, and eventually the entire budget is passed with that amendment, this would still have to come essentially before the Personnel Committee, if not the entire county board, to enter into a contract or to, I guess, review bids or RFPs regarding the personnel study, correct?
That is correct.
So I guess I just don't want to play on everybody. Just by passing this tonight, or if we increase the revenue and do this, that doesn't necessarily mean this is going to be done. It just said it's budgeted for. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bry. I'm seeing Supervisor Zimmer.
I'm opposed to this, and as I was to the last amendment, because these proposals need more careful deliberation. This stuff should have been brought before committees like Finance or Personnel for their deliberation, rather than putting us on the spot to make a decision tonight when there has been no careful deliberation. So I am strongly opposed and will vote against this.
Thank you, Supervisor Zimmer. Supervisor Metzger.
I also don't believe in this one. In personnel, when we can't get someone to get the job because the wages aren't there, we have to raise them, because otherwise we're going to be without these employees. So all along in the personnel, they have been raising according to the needs of the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the amendment? Supervisor Hummel.
One thing I would like to say is a wage study just isn't to get people to work here. It's also to retain the people we have, and to get them to a level of competitiveness around the area as well. It's not to just bring people here, it's to keep people here as well.
Thank you, Supervisor Hummel. Before I ask for any more discussion, I just want to remind everybody of our county board rule that we have, where the supervisors are limited to speaking 2 times on an item. So this motion is an item. I just want to remind everybody of that as we continue our discussions. Any other discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, the clerk will conduct the vote.
Supervisors will now vote on the motion to amend sales tax line item $7,560,000 and add a line item in the budget under personnel of $60,000 to include a wage study.
And that motion fails 6-18. So now we are back to the original motion to adopt the budget. Any other discussion on the budget? Supervisor Lillibridge.
So I've heard people say you need to come here with an idea that's fully fleshed out. We've got line numbers and items and dollars. How long have we had this budget before us? 30 days? And by everyone's admission, it's a very complicated document. So to say, how come you don't have this? I haven't had it in my hands long enough to muddle through it, so to speak. So what can we do for that? When must the budget be presented to us, and when must the budget be finalized so that it goes into effect? Do we have an answer?
The budget has to be approved, I believe, by November 15th.
Okay.
Is there a statutory amount of time when it must be presented?
There is not a statutory amount of time for which it has to be presented to the county board. In terms of the county board has to review it, if I'm answering your question correctly.
Does that answer your question, Supervisor Lillibridge?
Partially. So is the budget worked on en masse, or is it, okay, we do this section, this section, this section? And if it's done by section, why don't we get those as a preliminary document so we can study it on the fly? Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering if Supervisor Hansen could recollect when he solicited the various department heads for budget cuts if any came in?
Supervisor Hanson, would you like to answer that question?
I got more thank yous for asking. I did not get a department head come in, but some of them went to committees, and I gave them the option that they could go to the committee, their committee, and talk to that committee. The ones directly under the finance committee, like I said, 2 thank yous, and some of the people talked to the executive. So there was feedback.
Thank you. Supervisor Klein, you still have the floor.
Yes, did any offer any reductions?
Reductions?
Didn't you ask them for?
Can we just make sure we keep our comments directed at the chair, please?
I was curious as to whether or not any of them offered reductions in their budgets. Was that not the question?
Did I ask them to cut the budget? Is that what you're asking? No. I trust our department heads that they are going to give us a budget that is realistic, that covers the state mandates that we have to cover as a county. And I think there's a pretty good history here, Supervisor, of us doing a job with the tax money that's effective but isn't abused.
Supervisor Klein, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Supervisor Hanson.
All right, any other discussion on the budget? Or the motion to adopt the budget, I should say. Supervisor Matthew Phipps.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is very hard for me to talk about because I am personally very interested in positively wanting to do this because of my past and just my knowledge of what I will be talking about. Mainly, it's the difference between wants and needs. In committee, we had talked about in the highway department the request of purchase order for the next coming year, and everything was quite detailed and very organized, and I was in very support of a lot of it. However, when we started talking about the salt brine storage, it was recommended that we borrow $3.25 million for the next 5 years on projects, and I'm for all of that, to be completely honest with you, for the projects. However, within them projects are the salt brine facility. And I just was more understanding and questioning that I really want that, and I think that would be really nice to have for our salt brine and our sand to be inside. However, with the climate that we're going through as a county and the new sales tax that has been the highest tax increase of our community in the community's history, I don't really like to see, and I've been told by my constituents that, hey, why are we borrowing, $3.2 million for these projects? And with all spirit, I try to explain to them that, we're moving forward, we're doing a great job, we're trying to preserve our roads and our communities so that we have firm footing underneath us. However, in the climate that we're living right now with our wants and our needs, I don't believe that, I think that we could go without investing in the salt brine shed and sand facility at this time, not because I don't want it, but because we have bigger issues that are coming down the pipeline, such as the Manitowoc shop roof that's going to be needed to be done, which is going to be totaling over $500,000 coming up here in the next year. So overall, I really want all this stuff, but I don't know if it's in the best interest of the county, this budget, to approve it. So I would be making an amendment to the budget to reduce the borrowing from $3.25 million to $2.2 million for our next fiscal year. Thank you for your time.
And Supervisor Phipps, just so I understand that the borrowing that we are reducing would be for What did you call that project?
Well, it's, so the way that the Mr. Ziegelbauer wrote it in his letter to us was that he would be borrowing $3.25 million to finance these highway projects. And then inside the request for purchase in the committee, it's brought in with the brine facility, and then obviously the highway projects are put in together as well. So I think that that's where some of that money is going to approve that request for finance. And if there's any clarification, please help me. But essentially, I'm trying to differentiate our wants and our needs.
Okay, so it would be for the reduction of a brine facility.
That would be at the moment, yes.
Thank you.
As I understand, it would be to reduce the borrowing as well as to remove the revenue then from the highway department budget. Because it's going to be there's going to be an accompanying revenue and an accompanying expense. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? Let me see. Second by Supervisor Hummel. Okay, now I'll give the clerk a moment to type that out.
It's just a majority, right, Peter?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah. Okay, so now we have conversation about the amendment to the budget, and that would be to reduce borrowing line item under highway from $3,250,000 to $2,200,000 and remove the revenue pertaining to the brine facility. So any discussion on that motion? Supervisor Klein.
Mr. Chairman, I was wondering if the capacity exists today, or is that a future capacity that we're trying to fill a need for?
Thank you. Supervisor Benke, I have you next, and maybe you can answer that question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Here's another prime example, I think, of what Supervisor Bry was talking about, waiting to the final hour before we bring these amendments. I encourage you as a supervisor, before we have these budget hearings, we've had this budget for 30 days. In that 30 days, you could have called any department director and asked any question that you so will. You could have called the finance director and asked him, if I take $1 million out of here, because in this motion I still don't know what that's going to do to the levy. I assume that's got to get changed, because that's where the $1 million is coming out, so that will affect the levy. These are the questions that should have been asked before tonight. Not saying that you have every right to put forth your motion as you so choose. Your choice, you're a one representative 25. But waiting until the final hour so we don't have... Many times I've talked to the clerk prior to the meeting, and this is what I'm proposing, this is what my motion's going to be, makes her job a heck of a lot easier. Talk to Corporation Counsel, do I have any issues with this motion? There's so many things that you can do before this meeting occurs, so this is a mess, this proposal here. We are going to brine. Brine is the way things are going. They're getting away from dirty salt. It's not a like. When you're talking about highway, it's the best way to do transportation within Manitowoc County. This is something that is going in that direction. The state ran pilot programs on brine, and now everybody is going in that direction. We need to go in that direction as well. I understand the spirit of the law. We want to lower the property tax levy. There's a whole lot of issues that I'm going to talk about, which I am dissatisfied in this budget coming after. But in this particular case, not a great motion. Will not support it.
Thank you, Supervisor Benke. Supervisor Ryan Phipps.
Thank you, Chairman Martell. So I'm going to use this opportunity here to stress and again thank the supervisors that didn't vote for the $45 million loan plus on the courthouse, because that would put us even in worse shape. But going back to the last several years, and I'll tie this in a second, but we knew the lockdowns and mandates would cause these problems. And yet we did it anyways. We did it as a country, we did it as a state, we did it as a county. Now we're starting to reap the consequences. I expressed my concern about the giant loan on the courthouse. We did knock some of that down. I expressed my concern about the 0.5% sales tax because we didn't allocate it. There's no stopgaps. And like Supervisor Phipps said, that 0.5% sales tax just got gobbled up in our general budget. So I'm very dissatisfied with this budget, very dissatisfied in the circumstances that we're in. I know that we have mental health issues. I know that we have rising debt. I know that we have inflation problems, and I do understand this. Call to order. I would appreciate if we keep a proper quorum at this meeting, and I don't like to be interrupted while I'm speaking.
Good.
Point of order, then, Mr. Chairman. I thought we were talking.
Supervisor, can I recognize you and put your microphone on, please? Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, point of order. The discussion is not directed towards the amendment of the removal of the salt brine from the loan and the decrease in revenue.
It will be. Okay. All right, Supervisor Phipps, if you could I understand you're talking about debt, and I understand the bigger picture, but can you direct your comments about the brine facility, please?
I will. So, that being said, is that we have one particular department, the Human Services Department, that is blowing the budgets out of the water the last couple of years. And that's part of the reason that we have these deficits. And it's going to continue to hurt all these departments. Here would be an example of a safety concern that possibly in the future that we need to address. And now we're running out of money to address some of these concerns. We didn't make any kind of adjustment or reduction in the Human Services Department at all, like I suggested. And here we are fighting for the scraps of the Highway Department because we have such a big draw in these other departments. So this would be my opinion, and I'll speak to this later, but I will not support this amendment. I'm just pointing out the fact that we are losing resources to one department in particular, and we made no cost-saving measures at all in that department. And we still have not figured out how to proactively prepare for any of these problems. Like I talked about at one of the last county board meetings, when we get reimbursements, we could maybe plan for just half. So to tie this back in, is that now we're trying to pick away at the Highway Department because we're desperate for any ways to save funding of this current budget. So I'm very displeased, and I will not support this. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Phipps. Supervisor Hummel.
I agree with, thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Supervisor Banky in the way our attacking the winter storm is with brine. I plow currently. I think brine's great. I use a lot of it. I just feel the reason why I second this motion is we currently have a brine facility and it's working. We're borrowing more money now with high interest rates, and it's just not a good use of tax dollars as of right now. My goal would be is we do really well on the 0.5%, and maybe we have extra money left over, or projections are good, maybe we can still get it built. But just borrowing for it when it's not a need at this point, I'm not saying it's going to be a need down the road, because it is going to be a need. As they update equipment and get high capacity brine trucks, it's going to be a need. But as of right now, I don't see it as a need just because they have a working brine facility, and it would be a way to save $1 million in borrowing right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Hummel. Supervisor Matt Phipps.
Once again, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Now, I wanted to just mention once again, this is not me trying to attack the Highway Department, because I'm in support of Brian on the usage of our roads. And I think that I don't appreciate when the truth of the matter is I'm just trying to say, in my opinion, And from the questions that I asked, I think we were okay to survive another year with the facility that we have at this moment. And I was more I'm concerned about the roof there and obviously the total budget as a whole. So to say that I'm trying to pick apart just the brine facility, well, I think that that's somewhere where we could wait another year. I am in support of using it. However, I think we need to be diligent on where we're spending our money, especially if we're going to be borrowing money. So I'm sorry that it's being perceived that I would like to remove that. I don't want to remove having brine used on our roads. It's just I think that is a something that we can budget for maybe next year, not this upcoming year. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Phipps. Any other discussion on the motion to amend the budget? Any other discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will conduct the vote.
Supervisors will now vote on the motion to amend reducing the borrowing line item under highway from $3,250,000 to $2,200,000 and remove the revenue pertaining to the brine facility.
All right, that motion fails 6-17 with one abstention. We are back to the original motion to adopt the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing, excuse me, I would like to say is that the sales tax was brought up as basically the answer to take care of the problems in the Human Services Department. And I guess I have a problem with borrowing money besides the sales tax, because I was under the understanding that the sales tax was going to be basically going to save the day. And now we're looking at borrowing more money. It's almost like there's no end to the spending. So I guess I'm not in favor of this budget just for the simple fact that we're borrowing more money and we're supposedly having this sales tax money come in to take care of the problem, which it's not doing. So that's all I'm going to say. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Nadel. Next, I see Supervisor Ryan Phipps.
So, like I was saying before, is that I don't think it's fair to put this extra burden on the entire county, especially the other departments. I understand the complexity in the Human Services Department, but I think we have to make a good faith reduction. So I'm going to make a motion to reduce the Human Services Department by 10%. And that would be up to the director's discretion, but there is some mandated positions in there that, especially like the clerical end of it, that I see we could reduce some of the expenses in that department. And just to add on to this, in my time alone, there's been about 30-some positions that have been added in that department that we were told that had no levy impact. And in the last 4 years, there's been 58 positions added in that department, and the majority of them we were told no levy impact. I feel like we have some levy impact. So I would like to just propose that motion, and I'd like to get a clean look. And again, part of my thinking is to protect the employees that we have throughout the county, and then to be able to protect some of the departments with potential further problems or further reduction in revenue, like possibly a slowdown in the economy. So that's my motion. I'd be looking for a second.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Nadel. Peter, call upon you for your expertise.
I have no idea how we would effectuate this. And the reason I say that is if it was, for example, if you just simply said every line item, every expense line item in human services is reduced by 10%, we could do that. We can take that and reduce every one. The problem is the offsetting revenues that are coming in as a result of that would need to also be adjusted. As I understand, our expenses directly drive our revenues, and so those numbers also would have to be changed, but I have no idea which ones of those numbers would have to be changed. So that's where I can leave it, which is to say, if your motion is to reduce every line item by 10%, understand all our revenue line items are also going to be reduced as well. And that, I don't know if that changes the net levy. That's a question for the finance director.
To try to clarify. So 10% reduction in the levied positions that are not reimbursed by the state. The non-mandated positions.
Does that help?
I don't know what those positions are.
Okay, so we've got
Finance director's got to be an expert on that.
Supervisor.
I'm making a motion to reduct, so when I looked at this budget, it looks like there's 4 positions that aren't mandated that I think that are clerical positions that we potentially could reduce.
Could you, those 4 positions, are you talking about the document that we received earlier today?
Yes.
Could you identify those positions?
So you have CPS Transport Specialist. There's 4 positions, partially funded. So let's say that there's 1 position that we could reduce from there. So the CST Coordinator, partially funded. Let's say there's 1 position that we could reduce from there. And a lot of this I'd like the discretion of the director, but what I'm trying to do is reduce some of the expenses in the Human Services Department that aren't mandated. But I don't know how I can say that to get my motion across.
Well, the motion has changed.
Are you looking just to reduce the full-time equivalent number of employees in human services?
Yes.
By a certain amount, or by a certain number of employees?
Well, we could do it that way if that please have a motion, but I'm looking for a reduction of non-mandated employees in that department.
I think I understand what you're getting at. I don't know that we're gonna be able to get that number today, based on what the finance director had to say. So I think the way you think about it would be to just make a motion to reduce the number of full-time equivalent employees in human services by either a number of employees or a number by a percentage.
Okay, let's do 4 employees.
4 non-mandated
No,
just 4.
positions.
And that would be up to the discretion then of the Human Services Director. Yes. Okay, so I'm just going to clarify the motion and make sure that Supervisor Nato still seconds that motion. So the motion that I'm hearing and that we are able to work with is that we would reduce the number of full-time employees in the Human Services Department by 4, and that would be then up to the discretion of the Human Services Director.
Does that need to be a motion?
That's the motion.
With the Human Services Director, by the discretion of.
No, that part would not.
Okay.
And Supervisor Nadel still seconds that. Now we would go to discussion on that motion. Supervisor Banky.
Supervisor Phipps, I know where you're going, and I understand, and I share your same concern with human services and the expanding of the cost and expense in human services. But again, this is another reason why we have the budget that far in advance. We knew human services was a problem. You should have went to the, and you have every right to go to the finance director and say, I want to cut 4 positions. Like right now, this motion does not say where the savings goes. How is that going to affect the levy? We have no idea what that's going to do to the, we have that number? Should we have that number before we vote on this? I'm thinking we should. But that's a motion that should have been prepared before tonight, rather than trying to figure that out. Preparation prior to this meeting is very, very important. Talking to department directors, talking to Lori, okay, I want to cut, and they're there to serve the county, and you can ask those questions. You can ask, okay, I want to cut this position. What are the ramifications? Can I do it? They're levy positions. They're all levy positions. How much would that cost? Right now, we have no idea what that costs, those 4 positions. How's it gonna, where are we taking the savings, Peter? Please explain to me in this motion, when we can take a motion and clear out 4 people in human services, and how does that affect the budget? Shouldn't that be part of the motion as to where the cost savings is reaped? Is it in the levy?
In an ideal world, yes, that would be included as part of the motion, would be a reduction in the expense line item for personnel costs, for wages, for benefits, and on down the line. Yes.
Supervisor Bank, you still have the floor.
But where you're going, I understand, I am concerned, and that's one of the reasons why we are going to start meeting in January to start looking a lot deeper into human services and addressing those, and I'll address the rest of my concerns with the budget after that concludes, Mr. Chair.
I guess I just want to interject quickly too. I understand that it's frustrating that people are attempting to amend the budget, but we heard at the Finance Committee meeting last night, one day before this meeting, that if you're going to vote against this budget, you better have a plan, you better have a suggestion. I foresaw this, and this is why I recommended that all committees meet at least once between when the budget was proposed on October 8th and this meeting. And not all committees, not all standing committees did that. So there have not necessarily been all opportunities for these concerns to be brought to the appropriate committee or have the appropriate department director at those meetings to have that conversation. This is how the process works. It's messy sometimes. We want to understand what we're voting on, but I don't want to hear the chastising of supervisors who are suggesting amendments to the budget, because if they didn't do that, they'd be told that they have no reason to be voting one way or the other on this budget because they didn't have a reason or didn't suggest a change. So I think we've obviously learned in this budget process that we need to change the process going forward to avoid some situations like this. And I have a proposed ordinance on the table that you have had to have reviewed. That process didn't necessarily play out this time around, but that's something we're going to be talking about at the Executive Committee as well. Supervisor Bry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Supervisor Benke said a lot of things, so I'm going to call a question.
Okay, there's a motion to call the question. Doesn't really need a second, but I'll look for a second for the computer. There's a second for this. Supervisor Marsh is seconding the call the question. This requires 16 votes of the present membership.
3/4 of members present.
2/3 of members present. Okay, the motion is to call the question. If you would like to end discussion on vote yes. If you'd like to continue discussion on this amendment, you should vote no.
Supervisors will now call to question.
The motion to call the question has failed. Any other discussion on the amendment? Supervisor Marsh, I believe you were next before the question was called. Would you like to speak?
Thank you. Supervisor Phipps, I understand. I know where you're coming from. I do not like this either. But I don't know that this is the place to just sort of hack at the Human Services Department. There are big issues. We have to look into this more than just a monthly meeting. This is going to be, I will have this on my agenda every month so that we can talk about this, because something is wrong, and it isn't just something on the wrong line, but I just don't think that this is the thing to do, is to hack away at it right now. I appreciate the executive committee, and I will be holding them. I will be at the meeting, and I would hope that everybody else would be at the meeting when they start doing this in January. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Marsh. Supervisor Benke.
Supervisor Phipps, I apologize if I'm chastising you, because that was not my intent. And asking supervisors to be prepared for the meeting, I don't think is asking too much of any supervisor. And asking any committee to be held as the only reason to discuss the budget is also incorrect. You have a right as a supervisor. The department directors are there for you to call. If you have a question, if you have something in the budget that I think you're heavy, I think you need I want to cut something out of your budget, I want to ask questions. You have every right to talk to the sheriff, to human services, whichever department director you want to talk to, you have that right to ask questions. And all I'm saying is this process would be a lot cleaner if we would have done that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Benke. Supervisor Ryan Phipps.
So, Supervisor Benke, I forgive you, and I didn't take that insult in any way at all. And I do appreciate the comments from the supervisors that have been here longer, and I do understand the process to a certain extent. The problem that I run into is that there's other amendments that have been happening with line items throughout this budget. I think we found a clerical error on the Finance Committee. So what I'm saying, and I'll sum it up generally speaking, is that I was concerned about the courthouse dome. I brought my concerns up. Thank God we were able to limit some of that debt. I brought my concerns about a detailed plan of what to do with the 0.5% sales tax, and here we are. That's all gone and then some. I brought my concerns up about all these added positions in human services, 58 in the last 4 years, and that's gone. So now I'm bringing up my concerns that we're about to pass a budget that doesn't have any solutions long-term in any way, or any stopgaps for that department at all. And I'm proposing a small reduction in employees in that department. And my reasoning is actually more to protect the other departments. Because if we don't do anything, this problem is going to continue to multiply, just like I warned you the last several times we went through this. And I do appreciate it. Like, I go to a lot of meetings every month. You guys seen me at the Finance Committee. I ask a lot of questions. I read a lot of material. Plus, I have 5 kids and a business to run. So, like, I'm doing the best I can. But this is a concern. We see it's a concern. We see the problems getting worse, not better. And for the county's own admission, we still do not have a solution to the human services problems. And like, to Supervisor Lillibridge's comment, we should get this budget a little sooner, and I don't understand why we don't want to make any corrections to this department at all to minimize the potential pain that we're going to feel in the future. And then another point to this discussion is that when we originally went out to get the 0.5% sales tax, or was proposed to us, there's also a proposed increase in property tax, about 30%. That wouldn't even be close to covering these expenses at all. So thank God we didn't pass that. So now we have a 0.5% sales tax. Now we're about to go $3.5 million plus interest in debt, and we haven't done anything to solve the problems. So I'm proposing, in good faith, something that could potentially minimize some of the damage. And I don't know exactly how many employees in that department, but 150 some, 160 some, I think. So I'm proposing that, hey, let's just try to mitigate some of this pain before it continues to get worse. And then I also just want to point out something. The human service problems multiply. Our sheriff's department didn't double in size, but I'm sure they're dealing with some of these problems, whether it be mental health, drugs, illegal immigration. The sheriff's department's dealing with these problems too, but their department didn't double in size the last 4 years. So I do appreciate the fact that, we can have this discussion. And I will try to continue to have this discussion in multiple departments. But, you can put me on record right now. This problem's not going away, and it's only getting bigger. And I hope and pray that we are able to generate more money than the $7.5 million from the sales tax, because we're going to need every penny to solve some of these problems. So thank you very much, Tyler, and thank you for the time I was able to speak.
Thank you, Supervisor Phipps. I see Supervisor Schiesel.
I'm relatively new here, and also we don't need to vote on it, but I'm not the smartest guy in the room, I'm pretty sure of that. How come some of the supervisors get to talk directly to Mr. Phipps and not address you? That's one question. And then I would like to make a motion that that we get a copy of the 2026 budget at the June County Board meeting.
Supervisor Schiesel, at this moment, that motion would be out of order because we have a motion already on the table, correct? Okay, and then I apologize. I will remind everybody of the County Board rules. Comments should be directed at the chair, and supervisors should not be speaking to each other directly as a matter of decorum. So Supervisor Schiesel, if you'd like to bring up that motion later before we deal with...
There's anything on the agenda that
Sure.
probably address it for the executive committee when you...
I will take that up for you at the executive committee meeting.
We take up the ordinance.
Anything else, Supervisor Schiesel? Okay, we have a motion to amend the budget on the table. Is there any other discussion on that motion? Okay, I'm seeing none, so the clerk will conduct the vote and remind us what we're voting on, please.
Supervisors will now vote on the motion to amend by reducing the Human Service Department budget by 4 FTEs.
That motion fails, 8-16. So we are back to the original motion to adopt the budget. Any discussion on the motion to adopt the budget? Supervisor Benke.
Now I'll get back to the original budget. And again, Supervisor Phipps, I appreciate your direction that you were trying to go. And your intent was in the right direction. I just felt that the numbers, we needed to have the exact numbers as to where the savings was going to get, whether it was going to be a lowering of the levy or should have all been in the motion. I'm not real happy with some of the things that have gone with the Human Services Department, and we're not going to beat a dead horse, but speaking to the Finance Committee, using the ARPA money to backfill 23 and 24, I think I had a little bit different understanding as to how the sales tax money was going to. I thought, and to my dismay, that sales tax money was going to backfill 23 and 24, not ARPA money. And so we can take that ARPA money, and that takes care of 23 and 24. So now we're talking about 25 only. Sales tax money and the problems that are in human services. And yes, I have a lot of concern. I'm going to vote for the budget because I've always felt that if you don't have and I appreciate those that have intended to do what they've done in the amendments. I have the same concern. I just think the format was wrong. But I'm really concerned about where we move after this budget because of some of the things the county executive is saying about backfilling another $2.5 million into next year's budget, onto the next year's budget, and all of that human service stuff really concerns me about. I was really looking for some type of property tax relief and not just going out and spending a whole bunch of money with this $7.5 million. So that does disappoint me, but I'm okay, and I think we have some things that we're going to be working on next year to address that, or at least to bring it out into the open for discussion. And but I have the same concerns. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Benke. Supervisor Matthew Phipps.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, now we're kind of wrapping our heads around this new proposed budget, trying to move forward as a team to pass something so that we have our finances in order. However, what we are all quite clearly understanding that there's been problems in the past, and there's been the approval of asking as many questions as you would like as a supervisor, but once you start presenting solutions that aren't quite, in some words, clear in certain ways, but yet clear in other ways, it's no longer a viable solution for the success of reducing our budget. So then we become in the position that we're just supposed to understand that the budget is going up and we're supposed to provide more money to fund these different departments with no solutions. So I am not for just going the way that we've been going in the past and proceeding to continue just to add money to the budget. Even now with an influx of hopefully $7.5 million from a new sales tax that has never been in this county, we still have not patched the hole. Yes, we might have fixed it a little bit, but we need to change some things, and I understand change is uncomfortable. However, we are going to continue to have these problems get worse and worse and worse, and if we don't stand up as men and women that have been elected by our community to stop it, well, then we're just going to be gray, and we're going to continue to add money to the budget. And if that's what the will of this board is, then that's what will end up happening. But I frankly want to try to mitigate some of these issues. So I will be voting no on this because of the sheer fact that we have not made any reduction whatsoever in the budget. We've only added. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Phipps. Supervisor Bry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know tensions and passions get heated, and I apologize if I offended by you. I'm just, maybe because I'm a veteran, I guess, I know Robert's Rules of Order. I think things should be, I guess, orderized, and I respect everybody's decision. And if you don't support the budget, I certainly respect it. But for those that are going to support it, I can do things too. I guess to start off on the overall thing, I'm glad Chairman Martell, because I had the same discussion as well with some of the other supervisors. It can start at the executive committee talking about human service department, but we also have a human services board, which I happen to be chair of right now too. We have other opportunities through personnel. If the biggest thing, if you have questions, don't be afraid to call Lori. Lori, our human service director, is here tonight. She would gladly answer an email, a phone call if you have questions, comments. I'm sure she would gladly be part of that. But I guess if we want to have that discussion, that's great, because I'll definitely be part of that. And maybe I can't disagree with Supervisor Benke as well. I do have concerns as well. But also has been pointed out, and I think it was either Supervisor Hanson or Supervisor Benke that came up with this comment umpteen years ago when we all served on the Human Services Board. Sometimes it's called spin the wheel, especially regarding human services. That some years you're going to have a deficit and next year you're going to have a surplus. And I guess directing to the last 5 years, going back to 2020, 3 out of the last 5 years we've had a surplus in human services. The last 2 we haven't, and now it's been compounded by the error that was found and understandable. And everybody should be upset about it. I'm still upset about that. Everybody's upset about that error. So I respect those decisions, but there's definitely good things to do, but I look forward to the discussion about human services and the department. But I guess when we talk about never having a reduction, if you look at the rate right now as passed, if the budget is not amended, it's to be rounding off 3.68 per thousand. That's actually the lowest per thousand it's been since 1977. So that's a reduction in my mind. So, is it a perfect budget? No. Is any budget perfect? No. You try to do the best you can. I think there is room, and I guess if more specifics came out, and I disagree with our corporation counsel, I guess, in some of the points he made, you have to have specifics, because especially some of the motions made tonight were not taken. It was saying, I'm sorry, I defer to Supervisor Fift's motion, but I'm not chastising him, but his motion of taking 4 people out of the Human Services budget or out of the department, they should have been specified, because you're still going to take that amount, and if there was a revenue associated with it, we don't know that. We didn't know if it was going to take off it was going to take off the levy, but we didn't know the revenue associated with that. So there was specifics that weren't there. So I understand the spirit of it, and those discussions can come along as we move forward. Things can, just because it's a budget year doesn't mean things like such as that, and whether I agree or not, I'm not going to say that, but those things can be discussed throughout the year as well. It's not just at budget time. So that's all I have. I encourage you to support this budget tonight. I look forward to the bigger discussions, and just keep the discussions going. Don't be afraid to ask the department directors, other supervisors, anybody. I mean, there's people have answers, and they're not afraid to give them. You might not always agree with them, but there are answers out there. So thank you again, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Supervisor Phipps, I'm going to just cut in front of you, all right? Normally, I don't really like to speak too much at the county board meetings about where I'm going to vote on things. But this budget is something that I've been racking my brain with since October 8th when we received the budget. And being concerned about the financial situation of the county is something that has concerned me greatly over almost the last year when we got that news in spring that Human Services had errors in the budget and that Human Services was far exceeding the expenses that we had budgeted for. I very reluctantly voted for the 0.5% sales tax that we had because I was convinced that, I had been opposed to the sales tax much like the county executive for a very long time. When I ran my first campaign to join the county board, I campaigned against the sales tax. And this spring, the information that was presented with us, the situation had changed. I thought, when I voted for the sales tax, that we had a plan moving forward. We all received a document on July 8th detailing what the plan was for the 0.5% sales tax or the property tax increase, given either option. It suggested that we would need $4 million more in the 2025 budget than we would need in the 2024 budget. The county executive in a Fox 11 interview stated that $2.5 million would go to the Human Services budget. And we were to have $3.5 million, approximately, left over because the sales tax was too much money. We told people that. It was too much money and we didn't need it. And that's why we resisted it for so long. It's a sad state of affairs, and I can't find a single person when I'm talking to them about the Manitowoc County budget that they hear the sales tax is completely gone in budget 1. Not to pay back a deficit in 2023 and 2024, but going forward, I've been asking, what is the plan in 2026 when the $7.5 million sales tax is gone and the problems that we have now seen a consistent pattern of budgetary increase don't seem to be going away? A budget, in my view, is a plan of action going forward. The sales tax, when I voted for it, I thought it was going to mean transformation of how we budgeted for the county. We'd be able to reduce property taxes. We'd be able to not borrow for large capital projects. Remember when we talked about Manitowoc County being in a unique position because we didn't have a sales tax, and when we finally would have one, we wouldn't have to borrow for things like roads that other counties have to do? Well, now we're just like other counties in this budget. So it's very frustrating to look at this budget, to be at every meeting asking questions, and to not get an answer about what is the plan moving forward. As far as I'm concerned, I very much regret voting for the sales tax because nothing changed. Nothing. We're not reducing property taxes by any large amount. We're not changing our borrowing habits. We're not reducing any spending. It's status quo. And I can't vote for status quo when I promised the people that elected me to this position that this was going to be a very positive change to set us up for the next generation. The 2025 budget does not set us up for the next generation. And I'm very much looking forward to the conversations that we will have. And I'm hopeful that they will be fruitful next year in getting a handle on the bleeding that is happening in the 2025 budget. But I can't vote for it tonight. So those are the comments I will make. Supervisor Ryan Phipps.
Thank you, Chairman Martell. Very well said. You tend to articulate stuff better than I can, but I just want to remind everybody that this is the biggest tax increase Manitowoc County's ever done. Okay? 0.5% sales tax. That was supposed to give us extra money to spend arguably on roads, to fill some holes, and not only do we tax Manitowoc County the most ever, now we want to borrow $3.5 million. I will not support this budget. Thank you very much for the discussion that we were able to have, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Supervisor Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'm getting older and wiser because one of the most important things said tonight was by Supervisor Zimmer. And that was the idea that if we're going to change things, we have to take a deep look at that problem. We can't just change it quickly. I have no problem with the idea of let's look at the budget. Let's find out why we're not getting as much money from federal and state as we used to get. Make sure we're filling everything out correctly. And I appreciate the conversation tonight. But please remember, all of you have the right to go and find out how these departments are being run. You have the right to call the director. You have the right to go down and ask for a tour and walk around. You have a right to go to any of the committee meetings and talk to the chair, the director of that department, if you have a concern. That's how we learn. That's how we understand that budget book that they give us that we have to go through and read. You're always welcome to do that. And that's where solutions begin, is when you can sit down with the person in charge, sit down with your committee, and start looking at ways to spend the money as wisely as we can. But please remember, there is a history in this county We have a low tax rate compared to other places. We don't spend as much as other counties do. We've been frugal, maybe at times too frugal. Human Services has been under budget some years. The last couple of years they've been over budget. Things have changed. Our communities are different. There's different issues that have been mentioned here tonight. Those kind of things we have to learn and deal with. Some of those ideas may come from us if we take that time to go and visit and dive in deep with that director or that committee and find solutions. But we just can't think of a solution as being just cut, because we don't always know what you're going to cut when you cut a budget. You don't know how that's going to affect the department. You don't know how it's going to affect the staff. Those kind of things take that deep study that Supervisor Zimmer talked about. That's how you find out how it affects, and that makes you feel okay with voting for a budget. Is this budget perfect? No. But I'm supporting it because it's what we can do now to have another year, and I think a good year. We'll find those problems in Human Services. We'll find that. The extra sales tax money, I'm not sure it is the biggest sales tax increase in the history of Manitowoc County. There's been some units of government that have passed 30, 35, 40% increases to taxpayers. Sales tax will come down to what you personally purchase. For some, it may be a lot. For others, it may be less. So I don't know where that came from, but let's wait and find out and see how this works. So, you can not support this budget, or you can support it. My choice, after listening to department heads, seeing the process, talking to department heads, I'm supporting the budget. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Hanson. Anybody else looking to speak on the budget? Yes, Supervisor Banky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in reference to your comment about the sales tax, I guess from my perspective, there was no other choice. With the levy limits in place, 30, 40, who knows what that number would have been, we couldn't have done that by statute. So in order to solve our problems in Human Services, the backfilling of the hole, sales tax was, like it or not, it was the only choice we had, period. And I remember back when the ag agent, we had a soil, we had a dairy guy. And I'm sorry if I forget the time, but I had farmers coming to me and saying, I have an agronomy person that handles my agronomy. So what I did was I came to the board, I found that position, $50,000, whatever that number was, went to the Todd Reckelberg, said, what is that going to do? I want to take that off the tap, and that's the motion I brought to the county board. Gave it to the clerk to pre-prepare. So just a help. I think for those supervisors that haven't been here long, the specifics are really important. 4 positions, okay, roughly $20,000 or $50,000 a piece. Okay, $60,000, $100,000. Okay, but you go to that and then go to the finance director and say, I want to cut 4 positions out of Human Services. I want to cut $100,000. I want to take it off the levy. What would the levy be? What would my motion sound like? And give it to the clerk. So for next budget, for next year, I encourage you to be prepared. There's nothing, all of this stuff that have been brought up is good. I'm not belittling any of it in your intention by any means. It's just in order to get it done in this process, it has to be clean, has to be precise. And talking to the finance director, okay, this is what I'm proposing. He said, well, you can't do that. No, yes, you can. This is the motion I'm bringing. What would be the ramifications? Sometimes Todd Reckelberg did fight back once in a while when I asked him what it was. But that he had to do his job. I said, Todd, What is it? I need to know it. He didn't agree, but he still did it. So just a little bit of suggestion to those moving forward that be prepared, understand where you were going. Absolutely, I have the same concern as I had said, but that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Benke. Supervisor Sikowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've sat in on a couple of the Finance Committee meetings, and there's been a lot of good discussion. Tonight there's been a lot of good discussion. And going way back to when we had the ad hoc committee for the dome, that's the first time I started hearing about the half-cent sales tax. And there was a lot of discussion back then, too, different numbers being thrown around here and there. In this budget, I think Mr. Ziegelbauer took the lowest possible end of that numbers that we heard all that time and put it into this budget. Hopefully, if we're lucky and people spend a lot, we'll actually have more than that in that next budget. So maybe that'll help take and fill that hole a little quicker, hopefully. I'm going to support this budget also. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Sikowitz. Any other discussion on the motion to adopt the budget? Any other discussion on the budget? Supervisor Hacker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just think it's important, because it hasn't been said here tonight, to note that this budget is different than any home budget. It's different than any business budget. This is a completely different animal by virtue of the unreimbursed mandates that are coming from the state. There are things that we are required to do. And when it comes down, the way I understand it, after 6 months of conversations about the budget, the way I understand it is that the amount of discretionary spending that is in our budget is not enough to move the needle. And I think we have to, I think that's just the fact, Jack. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Hacker. Any other discussion on the budget? Anybody else wishing to speak? For a third, final time. Okay, the clerk is going to conduct the vote.
Supervisors will now vote on the resolution adopting 2025 budget and property levy.
All right, and the budget passes 15-9. So we have a budget.
Now I want to make a motion to get 2026's budget in front of me in June of this year.
Supervisor Schiesel, unfortunately that motion's out of order because it wasn't noticed on our agenda. But as I said before, I will definitely put the timeline of the budget as part of the discussion at our next executive committee meeting that we hold in January. All right, Highway Committee, Supervisor Benke.
Yes, we talked about Broadwind sublease, we talked about state RMA, bridge update, traffic and safety, winter brine facility, safety day, overtime and vouchers. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Human Services Board, Supervisor Bry.
No report at this time, Mr. Chairman, but we'll be meeting. I'll be honest with you, Lori, can I ask you, are we meeting this month? Because I missed last month's meeting, I apologize. Are we going to be meeting this November? I thought we were going to, correct, that's what I thought. That's what I thought, I wanted to make sure because I didn't want to give misinformation. So we'll be the fourth Thursday in the December, and I wish I could tell you what date that was on, but I think it's the 27th, 28th, but it's the fourth Thursday at 4:30 p.m., 4:15 p.m. at the Human Services Department. Thank you. And I guess just to once again follow up, I look forward to the discussions about human sources. And like as mentioned before, don't be afraid to contact myself or Lori or anybody involved with human services. We can certainly try to get answers or questions, and I look forward to the discussion about mandated versus non-mandated programs and things like that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Land Conservation Committee and UW Extension Education and Agriculture Committee, Supervisor Ryan Phipps.
Thank you, Chairman Martell. Real quickly, we just kind of did a review over our budgets. We just kind of wanted to make sure everything's clean and neat and that we have no unexpected additional costs, anything. Everything looked pretty good. And our next meeting is on the 21st of this month. That's all I have for my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Personnel Committee, Supervisor Marsh.
Thank you. I just want to add something. Back when I was a newbie on the board many years ago, I was on the Land Conservation Committee, UW Extension Committee, and they were cutting a position. I went to the Highway Department and got the book. I went through every line, and I was bringing up everything that I could to save that position. And that, I learned a lot back then. So just, it's a learning experience. So anyway, now getting to the personnel, I have no report other than our next meeting is December 3rd at 4:30. Thank you.
Planning and Park Commission, Supervisor Falkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Kevin, I'll increase my speed here. On the docket, we had 2 rezone requests and a variance request to discuss also the snowmobile trail maintenance contracts as possible acceptance of a resolution authorizing the county conservation aids grant, plus a resolution authorizing the potential fee adjustment to the Planning and Zoning Department fee schedule. The Commission started each of the rezone hearings and the separate parcels of David and Claire Peterson from the town of Liberty. Hearing applicants was present and testified. All parcels were examined under rezone criteria and the document support for the applicant. We discussed them and approved them for the county board's consideration, which you did tonight. Next, Commission proceeded to the variance request for David and Claire Peterson, which was one of the recent rezone parcels, and it was approved. And lastly, the snowmobile trail maintenance contract for next year and the authorizing of the conservation aid grant and the Planning and Zoning Department fee schedules were discussed. The contract was approved as well as the resolutions that was included in the consent agenda tonight. That was the end of our hearings. Our next commission date is tentatively scheduled for Monday, December 2nd. Advisory meeting starts at 3:30. The hearing starts at 4. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's the end of my report. And moving on to public safety. The Public Safety Committee met on October 29th. There was no public comment registered that day. The meeting was for consideration of department budgets. It was the department's options to present their budget request with the caveat that they are required to support supporting documents, including Excel files for fiscal support. Invitations to the departments were sent on October 20th with the required criteria for presenting their budget request and must be received by October 25th. To the committee members, having that information received, it would provide sufficient time prior to the meeting to review and examine the information. The coroner was the only department that met the October 25th deadline and the receipt of the Excel and supporting information to the committees. Kirk Green presented his position for increasing the deputy position. The deputy will be putting extra time, and he explained the reasons for the request. In order to forecast personnel costs in the upcoming year, the committee and other members, including County Executive Ziegelbauer, discussed the budget and extenuating circumstances. The motion was made to advise the Finance Committee to increase the coroner's budget by $25,000, a balance offset to be presented by the Finance Director or the County Executive. The motion passed unanimously. Although the Sheriff's Department did not meet the criteria for members to have the receipt of the Excel and other documents sufficiently prior to the meeting, I received it October 29th at 1:16 p.m. that day. There was consideration given to the department to speak. The Axon Enterprise Service, which includes body cams, squad cams, interview cams, tasers, and cloud storage, was the principal proposal. The budget request line is 53084 and included $100,000 yearly, just wrap it around about $250,000 each year for reoccurring cost to lease and subscriptions for these items. No one spoke suggesting these items should be denied for law enforcement tools, nor should this be construed as not supporting the department personnel. The executive committee, or the county executive, expressed that the original plan was to study other providers and their terms of use and other possible fiscal options. The impression is that it would be less of a budgetary hardship if it would be deployed in the goal of next year's budget. This notion was also reinforced from past department comments. A motion for no action on the budget request to reconsider this item next year at the budget passed 3-2. The ex-official chairman did not vote. Completing this special meeting, thanks were given to everyone participating. Our next meeting is scheduled for November 13th at 5 p.m. with the sheriff and the drug commander. Thank you. That is the end of my report.
Thank you, Supervisor Walkowski. Public Works Committee, Supervisor Sikowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our last meeting was on October 9th, which I reported on at our last county board meeting. Our next meeting will be tomorrow, November 13th at 4:30 at the County Public Health Building. That's the end of my report.
Thank you. Last is Transportation Coordinating Committee, Supervisor Hacker. Did we get that bus yet?
We did not. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing to report. Our next meeting is January 22nd.
Thank you. I do have one announcement. So our elevator is going to be undergoing some repair here at the County Board meeting building. So we're going to be meeting at the Manitowoc County Office Complex in room 300. That's 4319 Expo Drive. So our county board meeting in December is going to be at a different location. We have to meet in a different location because without our elevator, we are not ADA compliant and complying with open meetings. So that'll be for the month of December as well as January, I believe. So we're going to be hoping that our elevator gets fixed really quickly, but new location for next month, the Manitowoc County Office Complex. That's a bad name. Okay, with no further announcements and no further business, I'd be looking motion to adjourn. Second, we are adjourned. Can I get a printout of that vote, please? Yeah, I was happy.
Everybody.